All right, welcome everyone to our July 28th, 2023 edition of This Week in Crypto. I'm your host, Brian, alongside our lovely co-host and founder of Sentiment, Maxim. Max, how are you doing today?
Hi, Brian. Good. Heat is over. Rain is over. All good. And if even nothing is really big moving on the market, maybe it's a good time also to revisit, as we are planning to do few fundamental approaches or aspects of doing market analysis. So looking forward what we can discuss as the next.
Yeah, absolutely. There has been, as noted in our caption and our title of this stream, it's been eerily kind of quiet recently with, Bitcoin and Ethereum declining a bit over the past month, barely over the past week. You can see Bitcoin down 2%, Ethereum down 1.3%, and everything kind of feels like it's in a bit of a lull at the moment. There are some outliers. Tron has had a decent week. They haven't really made noise in quite a while. I see as of right now, Shiba is on a little bit of a pump. Internet Computer, which is up to the number 4 most developed asset according to our data, they've been on a bit of a run. And Sinfin here at plus 43%, really the big prize asset over the past week, unless you include Fantasy Gold, which continues to just be one of those assets that is not really tradable. So it's kind of weird where you're seeing the price and value of it going up, but nothing really being moved. So it's hard to really even talk about. But regardless, we're seeing a lot of stagnancy in the markets, and that's kind of what we're going to be talking about right now. Where we are in the market cycle, both on the short term and the long term. Oftentimes when you see Bitcoin go on a run and then start to flatten out, it's a matter of time until altcoin profits or profits from Bitcoin start to move into altcoins. And we've seen doses of that, one at a time. Obviously, XRP probably being the most notable about a week to 2 weeks ago. And then more recently, we had Chainlink going on a run. Doge had a run a few days back. It's a lot of isolated pumps and then kind of retracing back to the rest of the altcoin pack. And that's tough for a lot of people because unless you're ahead of the curve and you know what assets are going to be pumped by these sharks and whales next, you're usually just trying to buy in at the top or close to the top and praying that it continues to rise. So we'll be talking a little bit about that and some specific assets and how you can kind of see these bullish divergences in a lot of assets before they arrive, right? That's the literal $1 million question here is how can you recognize when there is going to be a pump in the markets or a specific asset before the pump actually happens, so you don't have to just jump in midway or most of the way into the pump already occurring. But we definitely are looking for Bitcoin and kind of a polarizing area right now, being just below 30K, to kind of start seeing a narrative switch where either the crowd starts to get overly bearish or overly bullish. What we don't want to see is just this constant push and pull that can last for weeks or even months at times, and kind of frustrate people. And I think that's what's going on right now is just a lot of tired faces out there saying when is the next big pump going to happen, or at least some volatility that can make things a bit more interesting. Oftentimes it takes a big shift down or a big shift up to start to get some of the utility metrics to start moving, and that's what we can start looking at now is how is transaction volume looking? How is daily active addresses and circulation looking for the number one asset in crypto? And what can we do once we do start to see these pick up a little? Because right now, Maxim, I'm seeing just a continued sort of stagnancy, if not a little bit of a decline on the transaction volume end. Daily active address looking, oops, I actually have to go to the last 3 months. Something in the middle of my screen. No, that's strange. What does it look like? No, I just mean what shape is the box and like where on my screen is it? Bottom middle. Is it like where my mouse is? There's nothing there. That's so strange. Just checking like Discord, Telegram, it's all minimized.
Yeah, when you click the buttons, oh yeah, now disappeared.
Oh, it was probably Skype then.
Yeah, probably.
Okay, just let me know if that pops back up. Thank you, Barish. So anyways, I was just saying, it looks like utility metrics are just kind of in this lull right now. You can see daily active addresses, it's kind of flat. Circulation's declined. So in terms of what makes assets pump, right, we tend to look for increasing amounts of coins moving around, right? And more addresses interacting on the network. That tends to be over time, if we look at like the last 8 years or so, what we tend to look for justification of assets rising, right? You can see daily active addresses did rise quite a bit. Circulation, not so much, right? We'd like to see circulation over time doing what Bitcoin was doing best back in 2017. But I like daily active addresses here first and foremost. And if we start to see a little bit of a rise there, that would be a nice bullish divergence that I think a lot of us here at Santiment are waiting for. But in the meantime, right, we can talk about plenty of other assets, or plenty of other metrics, I should say. And one thing to keep a close eye on is MVRV right now, where over the past week to 2 weeks, we've finally started to see the short and midterm traders underwater again, where they've actually, after the big ETF euphoria back in June, you saw that midterm, short-term traders, they were up above 10% on average in their profits. You don't want to be buying in when that's going on, especially when the long-term average profits are also way, way up here. But now, short and midterm, back below 0%. Long-term still is pretty scarily high, not to an extreme degree, but when you see long-term profits over like 15% or so, it starts to get a little bit dicey, as we can see from history, right? We see a lot of tops occur when this yellow line is way up high. And vice versa, when you see both the red and yellow, the short, mid, and long term returns well below 0%, that's the ideal time when you typically can buy in at a very low risk and the probability of a price rise is quite high. So short term, yeah, we have some justification to maybe return above 30K, but long term, we'd still like to see this come down a little bit because the long-term profits are just a bit too high. If you remember correctly, the year started off with Bitcoin only at about 17K or so. And here we are at 29K, where people are actually a little upset about it just because we're not at that 32K level where we topped out at a couple weeks ago. So everything is relative here, and you just have to kind of zoom out a little bit, as the saying goes, when in doubt, zoom out. I wanted to ask you, Maksim, what do you think about the overall sentiment before we jump into some of the social metrics here?
I think for the whole market, there are two phases, and the short to midterm depends when they develop. Before we really go up, I do believe we need to experience one more time very painful market movements. Let's put it this way. And but before that, Before that, I think we still need to explore new highs. Yeah? So first, a bit up. I don't know. Actually, not so bit. In Bitcoin can be up to 40,000, in Ethereum 2,600, and then we try to make a new low. So this is a rough setup. I'm playing this at the moment. Now, why? There is it's the least expected, or let's say the least I've seen around. Mostly, which you can see around, it's like Bitcoin and Ethereum, most likely about Bitcoin, maybe going down, and sometimes people say going up, and but no one says like radically going up and radically going down. This kind of talks like completely disappeared. So I assume we will see it. Yeah. The catch to it is we can go straight way down too, like without going up. So it's kind of risky assessment, but yeah, based on some secondary parameters, if we touch them, I still prefer this setup. Now, for the time being, even to push it to extreme for the market participants that they forget, or let's say they don't focus on Bitcoin anymore, I believe we might experience even more movements among altcoins. As there are some good narrative, emerging narrative. I don't know who is on the stream. Some people might know it. For them, it's not emerging. For others, it might be emerging. The major narratives like real world assets. Yeah. And we make a DAO with the exposure to treasury bills. Actually, the way they set up, it's quite unique. It's the first project on so big scale. It's not without risks, but there is a reason what Maker pushed. Some other projects might follow. Then what Chainlink did, what they announced during HCC in Paris, you saw quite intensive price movement. And as we discussed before the call, actually their metrics, surprisingly for me, yeah, normally when there is a big announcement and big price move, typically I say, okay, that's it, that's the top. But some metrics leaves an open space to go in higher. So for the short term, it looks to me we still might be exposed to more alts movement. And there are some crazy alts which I don't know what exactly narratives they're following, but there's definitely one. And if it keeps happening for the next week or 2 weeks, then you know what will happen next. And if it's like Dodge or Internet Computer, yeah, and some others questionable for me. Yeah. Coins will start moving around and trying to make new highs. Then what happens next? Everyone forgets about Bitcoin, probably even about Ethereum, and then they kick in. Yeah, so this is a kind of message we said in the very beginning. This is fundamental of all crypto trading and even investment. The least expected, the least talked about, or the topics which were discussed some time ago and now they suddenly disappear, this is what's about to explode. Yeah. And it's difficult to follow, and it's always confusing or even making you feel unpleasant because you missed all the time. But it's reward or invoice side of being rewarded with crypto. Yeah, if you are getting rewarded, that's a bad side. Emotionally, it's very destructive and unpleasant all the time. Yeah, you miss things, or you need to be patient, and it's boring. Yeah, investment or trading is not supposed to be fun if it's for money. It's supposed to be actually very uninteresting thing. And uninteresting now, it's like maybe alts. Yeah, and then when it gets a bit more to boring part with Bitcoin and Ethereum, then it will be Bitcoin and Ethereum. And I still prefer first up and then exploring new lows.
Yeah.
So it's a kind of summary, long one, but I took a bit time to explain the way I was thinking, how I analyze the data.
Yeah, I love it. You said something there, Maksim, that really resonates with me, and that is the fact that trading isn't always supposed to feel fun, right? It's supposed to almost be a game of chicken at times. That's kind of the way I've come to interpret it a little bit, where the people who are willing to take the biggest chances when everyone else is writing off that asset or that thing or that entity, they're the ones who get most rewarded, but they're also the ones who get most punished if they're proven to be crazy, right? We talk about, I'm trying to think of a good example. Solana, for example, a lot of people writing it off maybe about a month ago, and then it goes on maybe 2 months ago, it goes on a big run in June. Buying Bitcoin in general at the beginning of the year, right? A lot of people were saying, you're crazy. Look at how much it's retraced throughout 2022. Why would you buy at 16K when you can buy it at 8K when it's going to fall that low, in the early part of 2023? Well, obviously that never happened. We wouldn't say never. Maybe there's some point in the next 5-10 years where Bitcoin is below 10K again. But it certainly doesn't look like it'll be happening anytime soon. People who were buying those dips were handsomely rewarded, and everyone knows the mantra, buy low, sell high, but it's easier said than done to actually identify what the low is or what the high is.
Wasn't it I'm teasing now, buy high, sell low. I think this is the way.
Yeah, everyone,
but this
that's
is
what
actually,
everyone ends up doing.
This is the point. Yeah, if you are for excitement, for emotional experience, then it's exactly buy high, sell low. You will have plenty of it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if you decide to really try to be part of your financial stability or future, you need to take into account there is no other way. It will be struggling, boring, and not pleasant most of the time.
Right.
Yeah, there is no other way. If you want it to be fun and profitable, okay, that's not crypto, or that's not about. It is crypto, but it's not about investment. In crypto, it's about fun. I agree. That's why we try to do a lot of memes and stuff on the side, but it's not about your portfolio. Portfolio is boring and actually not interesting. Yeah.
I like to look at it as. Sorry, go ahead, Maxim.
Just the last side. It's not about finding buying points. It's always about finding exit points, and it's I don't know. It's difficult to convince or explain to majority, but 5 to 20% depends on in which auditorium you talk. They understand and they, or after some experience, they realize this is a key skill. You should know when to exit, or let's say reduce your exposure or reduce your risks. It doesn't matter at all how you exactly accumulate or buy. It's a secondary skill, and it's a very easy one. Exiting is a very difficult skill. Yeah.
Yes.
Buying the dips, yes, it's difficult. I myself also struggling quite often. But you have plenty of time. You can buy sometimes a bit early or a bit late. This is not the problem. Exiting. So if I only may give one advice to anyone, try to understand when to exit. And it will automatically mean you will learn when not to buy too.
Yeah, it's funny, Maxim. Yeah. I just watched a movie the other day called Dumb Money. It's really getting a little bit of, well, it's actually pre-released, but I happen to have a family member who's in the film industry, so they got an early copy and we watched it, and it's all about the GameStop craziness from a couple of years ago, back when we were smack dab in the middle of COVID and people were stuck at home, and Reddit had that big sort of initiative to pump an asset or an entity that a lot of people were writing off. And it was kind of a big victory for the average Joe being able to punish hedge funds that were shorting, right? That's a big anomaly, though. We have to remember. That's why it was such a big news story, because it's almost impossible for the small guys to punish the big hedge funds. But I remember one of the big lessons in that movie was, yeah, all of these people were gambling and, without knowing much about the stock market, they were seeing their portfolios rise and rise and rise. and it was just celebrations all over. But just as we often see in crypto, the hard part for a lot of people was actually pressing the sell button when they saw that they had made, 3x their investment, which is a ton, by the way, in stocks. Maybe not as exciting in crypto, even though a lot of people would take a 3x right now. People weren't able to sell, and there were plenty of success stories, but there were also a lot of people who held on for too long. Those diamond-handed people, as the memes tell you to be. They were punished for not being able to sell. It's much easier to hit the buy button and being excited by the prospect of an asset or a company going up a ton, but once it does go up a ton, do you have the ability to give up some future potential gains and not fall in love with the asset or the investment that you have? And that's the tricky thing for a lot of people, as you said, Maxim. So I think it's a really, really good point you made there. And I also want to point out, right now, if you're looking for how much pain there is in the market, which is usually ideal and a good recipe for buying, look no further than the poll we just put out yesterday. And I was talking about this with Maxim. It may not look like a huge bearish bias, but if we were to do 1,000 of these polls at any given time in the crypto markets, I would estimate, this is just a theory and not something that should be calculated or anything, but I would estimate that 70-75% of the time we would see more people predicting by far that prices would go up, right? Bitcoin above 32K, Ethereum above 2K, for whatever the prices at that moment would be. And the bullish option would be the one that is selected more than the bearish option. Well, right now, there's a little bit of a skew toward bearishness. Not a huge one. 42.5% believe Bitcoin will go below 27K versus 40% believing Bitcoin will go above 32K. It doesn't sound like a lot, but like I said, most of the time there's a bullish bias, especially on crypto or on crypto Twitter or on Reddit, where there's kind of this upvote retweet mechanism where optimism tends to be rewarded, right? Well, right now it looks pretty clear based on over the last month, crypto declining a bit. People are a little bit exasperated, and they're tired and fatigued by the markets going the direction that it's going. And this is starting to look like early signs of a buy opportunity just based on sentiment alone. We could be in a little more pain, as Maxim said. Maybe we go above 30K one more time. Then there's a run toward 25K and people are really put to the test. But based on what we're seeing here, people are already starting to get that FUD bug that would indicate that we're close to a lot of people dropping out and saying, screw the crypto markets, I'm moving on to something else right now. And that's typically when people start to make the most money, and investing in crypto being a bit boring right now is the time to do it, right? And if you're not buying with just a little bit of a tinge of pain or concern, like what the heck am I doing, then you may not be making a good buy, right? If it's just an easy, like, oh, Bitcoin's up 20% over the past month, I'm just going to ride it up until it's up 30%. If you don't feel a little bit of concern, then maybe you should be concerned, as counterintuitive as that sounds. But yeah, that's enough for the theoretical part. I think we talked about it quite a bit, and maybe we expand on it a little bit more because crypto has not had as many storylines into the second half of July. But there's still plenty we can go over here. I was pulling up social dominance a little bit earlier, and I wanted to note that what was this? Just yesterday, we had a big dominance spike. This was the highest percentage of discussions related to Bitcoin in a couple of weeks. And I believe it was related to kind of the reaction to the Fed bumping up interest rates again, which of course is a story and something we need to be monitoring. This is officially the highest interest rate level that the US has seen since 2001. And that's, a cool 22-year high is something we have to be noting, especially because last month what was it, late, it was either late May or early June, they for the first time in a couple of years, the Fed didn't raise interest rates, and people were very excited, and that led to the ETFs being released and a lot of people getting very optimistic. But now we're back to reality, and the Fed is not done apparently. Maybe this one is the last time for a while, but either way, we're up near 6%, I believe, in terms of interest rates, and that's still something that is going to make it hard for the economy to really flourish until inflation goes down. That's the whole directive that the Fed has right now. And once inflation goes down, then we can see the S&P start to resume. And you may be asking, well, crypto isn't the S&P. How much does that really matter? Well, let's take a look at the correlation here, Maxim, and check out exactly what's going on. Because as we've noted, for those of you who have seen our streams over the past 2 years, really, the correlation between crypto and the S&P 500 has been pretty high, especially during the downswing throughout 2022. I'll zoom out here. We'll just go toward early 2022 until now. And you can see how Bitcoin and Ethereum, respectively, in bright green and dark green, and then the S&P 500 here in teal, they really stayed pretty tied together. You can see the S&P kind of pulled ahead last August, then fell back down with it. Then we had the big FTX collapse where Bitcoin and Ethereum really started to look dicey. And this was the big pain point where there was a ton of capitulation, and everyone on this call wishes they put all their life savings in back here, because crypto, of course, flourished right after that. But you can see that the S&P kind of stayed in close tandem until early May. And that's where we saw this very weird breakout of the S&P 500, which is now at like a 15-month high, I believe, whereas Bitcoin and Ethereum really dropped down. And then, of course, we had the announcement that there would be no interest rate hikes for the first time right around here. The S&P went nuts, but crypto didn't. And a lot of people were scratching their heads going like, wait, we thought that the whole reason that crypto was getting suppressed was because it was so tied to the economy. And now the economy, or at least in the US and to an extent the world, they're starting to look really good again, but crypto isn't seeing that same breakout. And now the big question is, how tight is that correlation? And at least from what I'm seeing, Maxim, there is not nearly that same level of evidence that crypto is being tied to the S&P and world markets the way we saw from January 2022 until like May 2023. Go ahead.
This is the point, and correlations, and I say correlations because there are many different ones, exist until they don't. And it's very one of these difficult and painful parts for human mind. You get used to it, and becomes rational and easy to believe. Okay, correlation exists, and it will stay forever. It will not. It never. There is dozens of examples. I don't know, like dollar price with stock price. I don't know, or commodity versus bonds. There are many beliefs because they do exist correlations long time, and the moment change, you try to catch to them, and but they do not anymore. The market changes behavior, and in this case, or let's say in our case, between crypto and real economy represented through stocks or through indexes, I think they're catching more like, or they're playing more like a catch game. In most cases, crypto moves easier, faster, and earlier, and more volatile. And I think if we compare like pure mathematics, actually maybe we should do it one day. We will see it. crypto markets easier to move, less regulations or less capitalizations, less institutional participants like pension funds. So it moves, when it moves much faster and much more far away. But now what happened with all this, when the markets were depressed, it did to some degree helped the real economy to become a bit more reasonable for the time being. And indexes or stocks, they, the same like crypto, they predict the future. And what we see in S&P or NASDAQ or I don't know, technological many stocks, they predict that there will be a wave of very good news. I don't know, like profits and good numbers, and inflation goes down. It's coming. It's already, you can see it on the market prices. It's being priced in, or the market is very smart, and the news are coming. The moment they will come, okay, the stock market's done. So this is for stocks, yeah? Just be prepared, we will have a flash of very good news. Actually, we've been seeing them already for some time. Just read the Fed statements, how good actually economy is doing. You read it quite obviously there. Despite increasing rates, low unemployment, high demand, and now even inflation is going down. What else do you want? Well, of course, unless you look into details, understand that this debt is actually quite a heavy one. If you need to pay on the whole debt, if you need to pay 5%, okay, good luck with this over a long time. But market doesn't look like 10 years ahead. It just looks 6 months ago or 6 months ahead. And when in crypto, it's a different situation. Yeah, in the stocks and economy, we have inflow of good news, and looks like it will peak and be even more. In crypto, it's always like between two: heavy blow on regulations and excitement of institutional inflow. Yeah, so you have both of them, and both of them playing at the same time. So you have, it's exactly what you see in the market of Bitcoin and Ethereum. There is inflow of institutionals, there is inflow of big players, there is a big money coming, and at the same time, there is a very strict regulations and unpredictable decisions of SEC and other around the world. And it's happening at the same time. Yeah. So my theory always was that big players are coming and they just lobbying or bribing regulators to let them conquer as much of the market as possible. It's the only explanation you can give it to it. So you are kind of, when you see this, you're more or less on the safe side, but you need to plan a very long time. Yeah? These institutions, they have, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4. They can wait 5 years, whatever. They do everything they want to really take, or they will try to take 80% of the market. So they will push and make you believe it's done, it's dead, it's scam. I don't know what. They will make you believe it's only those who can come through all KYCs, and you can buy it only from Bank of America or JP Morgan. I don't know what. This still will come. But the interest is there, and probably what they underestimate that you cannot really tweak or control crypto anymore, as also America is not dominating the whole world financially too. So it's become very dispersed. Well, not very dispersed, but a little bit more dispersed than, let's say, 50 years ago.
Yeah.
And you push it too strong, okay, then the crypto goes somewhere else. Even in Europe, it's considered to be the try to play against or the play against America. So we have these two powers. Institutionals are interested, big money are interested, and they're playing as intentionally or unintentionally. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of conspiracy with regulators. And of course, it is exactly what you see in the prices. Yeah. So then you just make your bets. Okay, I don't know exactly when Bitcoin will go up. God knows, it's a big game for me. You can play some smaller ones here. Where it's more obvious a narrative, and you see the community, or you can track network activities growing, yeah, or dev activities growing. So there's some shorter term games we can play, because Bitcoin literally, I don't know, it may go like literally next week to 40,000, or it may not, and it will go down, and it will go to 40,000 1 year. It's very difficult to predict it. But some other projects, like a Maker or Curve or ENS, and there's dozens of others. So it's a bit more interesting, or let's say a bit more predictable with the power of data. The others are just data just says. Institutions, their accumulations are big. Those also accumulated in big wallets. And the fear is the stable coins. If you show it a bit later, this our chart layout with dolphins and sharks, stable coins accumulations keeps happening, even or especially on a generally declining stable coins in the crypto market. So generally stable coins getting less since 6 months, we have less. But accumulation for smart players, those holding between 10 and 100,000 or 200,000, they keep increasing stables. So there is a wall of war. It's very obvious, and it's a perfect setup for market to go up. So there are enough signs. We can go up any moment, but we can also just keep suffering.
Yeah. So, and let's look at some of these stable coins too. I think you made a lot of great points there, Maksim. And it's obviously the institutional investors, those large sharks and whales out there, whether they be transparent or anonymous, they're always making moves that we need to be keeping an eye on. And especially this green line for Bitcoin, you know, we know the story there where the 10 to 10,000 BTC addresses, you know, sharks and whales, essentially, they are the key stakeholders that often kind of drive the entire crypto markets. And we saw the big run up that they had just prior to the ETFs, by the way. I think the ETFs were announced right around the 15th and 16th for BlackRock. And that's when we had this big ascension. But we already were starting to see signs of sharks and whales maybe getting a quick whisper in their ear about them. And they made a lot of money from this accumulation right here. And of course, they started to take profit right around the top. We had one final big anomaly on July 12th, but the sharks and whales were already starting to decrease their supply held. So that was a good sign that maybe you should follow their lead. Meanwhile, as Maksim mentioned, the stable coins, we look at Tether.
Before we go to next, this is most of the time, like literally as a rule of the thumb, identifying the key groups of hodlers. This is the one on chain metrics. Okay, there are 3, but it's one of them, and it's as generic. It doesn't need to be very detailed. Doesn't need to be super complicated. Bitcoin, I don't know, 1 to 10,000 bitcoins, as simple as that, and some other. We are observing like a Maker or Curve. It's a bit different formula because it's a smaller one. Or as a matter of fact, we are working to implement it on the whole set. Okay, originally I think 100 assets, specific metric called whale. It's a bit more mathematics than what we have now. So we will soon roll it out. I saw already preliminary results. It looks good. So it's a one metric which really can help you a lot. Really happy a lot. And you can put it on your chart layout, 10 assets, and you can compare where there is accumulation happening. It will be much better than 80% of others because this is a signal. Yeah? And there is a lot of noise. But when people commit in their money and do it on a constant basis over a relatively long period of time, like at least 1 month, 2 months, this is a signal. Yeah, all others, tons of noise. And then there are some other things which can also be considered a signal. But this is one of the really key parameters everyone should know.
Yeah, I agree. I think especially for the more mid-cap to low-cap assets, looking at that range of like $100,000 to $1 million holders, that's a good kind of rule of thumb for interested key stakeholders that typically have enough capital to move markets themselves. As most of you probably know, we have several models that you can download to show many, many different assets at the same time. This one happens to be a mini model of our whale transactions model, which is very quick to load, unlike our larger one that takes a few minutes. And you can see, you know, at any given moment, like what's going on in terms of whale activity, and Ethereum showing very little at the moment. These numbers here kind of show like since it's on like a 4-hour candle, we look at 32 hours at a time. And if it's a high percentage, that means there's a lot of whale transactions over the last couple days. If it's low, there's very little. Right now, very recently, Shiba started to show some big whale activity, for example, and we're looking specifically at Shiba holders with $100,000 to $1 million in assets in their address. So when they're starting to get active, that means there's more volatility. And when there's more volatility, you tend to look at what direction prices are moving. And obviously, Shiba's been pumping, where we can see that just over the past day, it's up 6.3%. That's a divergence from the rest of the markets. So when you see that whale activity is high based on a 6.3% pump, it's pretty likely that there's some profit taking going on. And we won't, really get granular and look at it on Sandbase right now, but this is just an example of what Maksim's talking about, where you can kind of look at those specific addresses for some of these mid and small cap assets and quickly find out what those powers that be are doing with their assets, so that you can be informed on where the price is likely to be going based on where the whales are expecting it to be going. So I definitely recommend people check that out. If you have a Sandbase Pro account, you can easily just download it, make a copy, plug in your API, and you're good to go. Even if you're on a trial, same thing. Open a 1-week trial now and you can check it all out. But going back to our main metrics with Bitcoin and some of the stable coins, Maksim mentioned that stable coins, there are a lot of people flocking to them right now. And it's kind of a weird exception. Tether, if you just look at Bitcoin here and Tether in red, you see how these are kind of inverted when I go back and forth like that? Well, there's a reason, especially here in mid-June, where you start to see this big drop off in the Tether line as Bitcoin's line ascends. Well, there were a lot of whales that were trading out their Tether that they were holding on the sidelines, their dry powder, and putting it in BTC with the anticipation of this run up because of the ETF announcements, right? And then once we kind of started to peak and things got stagnant, we saw a decline in Bitcoin, but it wasn't going back into Tether. Tether has still declined over the past month or so, month and a half even. And meanwhile, the other stable coins like USD coin here, it's continuing to rise back after all that FUD that was happening back in mid-March, about 4.5 months ago, where USD coin was under some serious hot water and being investigated. Well, it seems as though those fears have gone away. Binance coin, or Binance USD, I should say, really, really ascending fast. And it appears that the sharks and whales are not worried too much about owning this coin at the moment. Maybe some of the Tether holders are moving into USD coin and Binance USD and DAI, which is also seeing a ton of ascension right now. So yeah, you may look at Tether and go, oh, people are not really going back into stable coins. Well, you have to look at the others as well, because USD coin, Binance USD, and DAI specifically are seeing major, major accumulation right now. And I don't know about you, Maksim, but when I see these 3 stable coins being accumulated, but Tether isn't, I tend to think that there are altcoin buys coming up, especially DAI and BUSD. These two are very commonly associated more with altcoin pairs when people want to trade into, Shiba, Doge, things like that. Binance in general is noted as the leading exchange in the world, and a big reason is because of the hundreds of different altcoins that you can trade into. Whereas Tether, that's where you see more just straight up Bitcoin to USDT trading going on, as evidenced by the inverted correlation that we talked about with the ETFs last month. So I'm curious what you think about this, but when Tether is moving down, but USDC, BUSD, and DAI are moving up, do you get the impression that this kind of lends to our theory that altcoins could be the next move right now?
Oh, honestly, I don't know if would be, but probably the correlation, or let's say the connection between these two facts is, has other reasonable causation. I just don't know yet.
Yeah.
Or it's a multi-layer story. It's all about trust in stable coins, as we've seen quite a lot of test of the trust.
Right.
And there was a time even, funny enough, when USDT considered to be the most safe, or it was overpriced compared to others. Crazy times. So yeah. I don't know exactly the story, but generally, when you look into these numbers, it seems to be there is no deep buying, or not as you would expect. If people are convinced this is the time now to go massively out of deep stable, it means lack of risk, into more risky one. They're not doing it yet. So this is the main story I'm reading from the data.
I think that's fair.
There is no buy in the deep, or there is no FOMO, no buy in the deep. There is some time in some coins, but it's not a market-wide event. Where in stocks, for instance, it's a market-wide event. I can assume in Meta and Apple, I don't know, you name it. They actually, you should probably start thinking to take profits. And here, as they experienced FOMO, there was a little bit when we tried to break 2,000 in Ethereum a few weeks ago, but not much. So there is not FOMO yet. And repeating, this is one of the main reasons I slightly prefer we go to break current highs, Ethereum 2.4, 2.5, Bitcoin all the way to 40,000, just to impact participants to see on a data level there is a FOMO, and then we go down. Typically, how market try to first confuse and then punish you. And stablecoins contribute to the story.
Yeah, I think at least what we can say definitively is DAI is very heavily associated with Ethereum. So I do pay special attention when this yellow line here is moving up the way it is. I've seen in the past, maybe we can go back a year here. The big event, of course, was the September Ethereum merge, right? And we saw right about a month beforehand, back in early August 2022, we start suddenly seeing this big accumulation. And right after the merge, a slight drop happens, right? And Ethereum during this time kind of fell down. And then all of a sudden, DAI is just exploding with more and more accumulation. All markets kind of dropped around here. So this is an anomaly. And then it's kind of resumed. But the more I see altcoin associated stablecoins getting accumulated, the more encouraged I am that that may be the next phase. But as Maksim said, it may not happen immediately, right? This is more of a long-term trend. You don't just suddenly buy a bunch of altcoins just because DAI and USDC and BUSD are going up. You have to be a little more nuanced and understand that the rise may happen after 3 falls. And that's why it can be difficult to predict. But for the interest of time, I also wanted to show one other indicator before we jump into a few questions, assuming there are a few. Let's look at the last 3 months of the ratio of transaction volume and profit to loss. So in other words, we're looking at whether there is more transactions where people are moving their assets at a higher level than when they got it, or at a lower level than when they got it. And when it's higher, that is more indicative of perhaps a retrace coming up. If it's lower, then that's perhaps a sign that capitulation is happening and there could be an upcoming boost. Now, I find this to be more of a short-term indicator myself, or maybe sometimes midterm, but generally we want to avoid crypto when we're seeing a ton of profiting, when people are not just in profit, but they're actually moving their coins out while in profit. They're basically there's a lot of sell side pressure which is associated with upcoming moves down, like what we saw in just the past couple weeks. This would have been an ideal time to get out, obviously, with this green candle showing we got up to almost 32K and then dropped back down. And then the question is, where are we now? Well, Bitcoin here in blue is actually showing a huge loss ratio at the moment, which is, in my opinion, a very encouraging sign that we may be going back up to 30K, at least before we drop down to 27, 26, some of the prices that I'm seeing out there. There are a ton of almost at a 2 to, or a little over a 2-to-1 ratio, I should say, of transactions that are happening where people are just getting rid of their coins at a lower price than when they obtained them. And that's a good sign that Bitcoin can rebound. Ethereum is kind of on the other end of the spectrum, where it's actually up, not at an extreme level, but enough where it indicates that maybe there's a little too much profit taking going on. Maybe people that bought in a couple months ago were kind of tired of this 1800 to 1900 range that we're in. So that actually indicates that we could be coming down first, and then maybe that, big stablecoin accumulation that we're seeing in the sharks and whales, then that starts to take effect. But for now, it actually looks like Bitcoin may be the better bet just over the next week or two, simply based on the capitulation that's happening there and the lack of accumulation that's happening on Ethereum, and XRP, Litecoin, Cardano. They're kind of just neutral at the moment, but I find that to be quite interesting and something you guys probably could benefit from paying close attention to as this week progresses here. But we don't normally see a big divergence between Bitcoin's ratio and Ethereum's ratio for this metric. With that said, why don't we take a look for like 10, 15 minutes at a few questions, assuming we have one or two, Bulrush? Hopefully Bulrush is still with us.
I've already dared chat that if they don't come up with something, I will ask for Harry Potter's Sonic Obama Inu 10 something.
Well, I don't even know what that means, but I like it.
The ticker is Bitcoin, so if you want to look at the shitcoin that is hyped recently, you could take a look at that. Otherwise, we'll wait for some questions.
What's the ticker?
The ticker is actually Bitcoin, like the fully spelled out word Bitcoin.
Oh, I don't even know if we have. I highly doubt
probably it's too small, yeah.
Oh, nope. Our devs are on it. I see it. Harry Potter, Obama, Sonic 10 Inu.
Yeah.
I have never heard of this in my life.
As far as I know.
That's very clever that the ticker is Bitcoin. That's so funny. Can't believe this is the first. Let's find out how recent this asset has existed. It looks like it started in May, so it's a little over 2 months old now. So it's a very fresh asset, more and more trading volume. We don't have ERC20 data on it because it's not an ERC20, but we can at least see that the trading volume is rising, or at least it did up until the end of yesterday. It might be too early to tell, but yeah, it does appear to be getting some extra hype. The price did
maybe
top
it was
out
just added because it should be an ERC20 token, but we don't have on-chain data yet.
Okay, good to know. Either way, whether it's an ERC20 or not, we don't have full data on it today, but we can at least see that the price is at it peaked at about 10.8 cents. Now it's back to about 8.1 cents. Volume went, it was ascending at least up until a couple days ago. So that's promising. It would be interesting if we have dev activity, but we don't.
No, I don't expect any dev activity.
Yeah.
What I would expect is probably the moment we calculate the data, interesting to see network growth. How many people do know beyond Bullish? How many people know about this coin? And Yeah, trading volume is okay, but most likely we will see only at the very last stage some divergences. At the moment is who is buying, how big are the wallets. I assume it's a small wallet game, but maybe I'm wrong. Need to wait till data is calculated. Do you know, Max, do you know when we added this coin? You know so many things, which I never heard about.
No, I was kind of surprised that we already have it when I checked.
Ah, okay, so you're surprised with the velocity of whoever's taking care of this. Okay.
Yeah, props to our dev team for sure. Yeah, I mean, obviously there was a Twitter API change here, so don't put too much credence into the drop off here, but it started being talked about in early
You
May.
cannot track it probably because of the name Bitcoin. It's kind of confusing. Might be confusing.
Yeah, that's why I'm only looking at the actual raw name instead of the ticker, but we can at least see, if we look at the last month, I mean, there's a little bit of discussion over the past couple of weeks, but it's pretty seldom, almost nothing on Telegram. Reddit seems to be the one that's propagating this asset mostly right now. But yeah, I mean, we can't really do much analysis on it, at least for now. But I am interested once we get ERC20 data, whether we can start to do some proper investigating of it, like we did for Pepe in the past, and Dojilon, just to name a couple other meme coins out there that kind of existed just for laughs. And I also wanted to look at our top 10 trending assets or discussion topics for a minute, just to see if anything's out there. I'm not quite sure what
Yeah, Bank of Japan, they changed their monetary policy. Been discussed quite intensively. It happened when you were sleeping. Yeah.
That would make sense.
Yes. Most of the topics now related either to treasuries or stocks, and some news about scam, backman, fraud.
Yeah.
Difficult for me to pronounce, but this is, I think, most people now pronounce it. Otherwise, no new narrative, at least. And that's the main reason I still keep to our maker position. I do expect it. It's surprising, actually. It made quite a run. And I've never seen it, neither maker itself, no DAI, no DCR, no real world asset, REA, nothing in top trending words. So it seems to be under radar. And if someone, as I see in a stream, asking what will be the topics where people commit, I think real world assets, tokenization. If we see it trending, that might be kind of very rational or good rationale for big money to try a bit more aggressively go into crypto. But could also be some other narrative.
Yeah, maybe we could look at Maker for a moment. I just really quickly wanted to see kind of the bullish versus bearish narrative on our social trends page, which, by the way, if you guys don't know, you can type in any word here and kind of get a social volume look, not just in total, but by platform. It's really awesome. And one thing I like to look at is the amount of positive sentiment words and amount of negative sentiment words, and comparing them directly against each other. And typically when you see the negative words start to become prevalent, as we saw here, that is when bottoms form and you see a climb. And then when positive biases start to occur, especially right here, right, that's when you typically see sell signals and you want to start taking profit because the mainstream is getting a little bit too excited. Right now, it doesn't look like there's much of a bias in either direction. I'd argue that maybe right now, at this very moment, there's a bit of a bullish bias due to the fact that there's a slight climb toward 30K going on again. At least there's an attempt at it. So people might be getting excited once again. 30K isn't just a round number. It's significant and something we should watch because of the psychological euphoria around it. There's a noticeable higher level of excitement when Bitcoin is above 30K, and a noticeable kind of skepticism when it falls back below, like we are right now. And that's part of why we had seen that bearish bias in a few places. But right now, it looks like people at this very moment on the hour are getting a bit excited once again, and that is a sign that this rally toward 30K may come to a temporary stop. Now, once we see, some big red bars that are neck and neck with the blue bars or even above the blue bars, that would be a good sign that that breakthrough to 30K may finally happen again. But at least for now, I'm seeing a very minor bullish bias. I'm going back to Maker, as we discussed. Let's take a look at that, because I'm with you, Maxim. I think it's a very interesting asset to look at after it's gone through its respective pump that's been completely independent from the rest of the altcoin pack right now. You can see it really started way back on, what, a month ago to the day, June 28th.
Yeah. Well, this is where it become, well, at least to some degree known. I don't know how many know. They did very interesting things. So what they invest money in what's called RWA, real world assets, in this case in treasuries, and for the profits taken from it, they buy, and you can see it on chain. Actually, we build the dashboard for internal use, where you can see they do spend, I don't remember now the number, every half an hour or even more frequently, these profits to buy back Maker. And they bought already quite a lot. So the story is getting traction, and I do believe when we have a top, and it's not far away, just let's be honest, we are very close to the top. If you look into MVRV, you will see quite a worrying picture. But I haven't seen much talk about it, so it's difficult. And you remember, it's difficult, supposed to be difficult. There must be talks around it. There must be talk around it, that high rate being available on Maker, and how they buy in real world profits from Fed and putting into crypto for crypto brothers. It's a kind of cool story, but not many talks yet. I heard it, or I read it a little bit here and there, but really little bit. It should ideally show up in our top 10 emerging topics. If it's there, yeah, I will sell everything. Now I try to keep it. Yeah, you are looking very kind of elevated. Yeah, short term, it doesn't look good, but okay, long term it not so bad, because it was so long bear market.
Yeah, I mean, the 30-day isn't in an extreme position of danger, but it is plus 11% for 30-day traders, which is a concern if you start to get toward 15 to 20, as we saw just about a week ago. That was a clear sign that we were topping out. So it got above $1,000, then it retraced. But look at how, even though it got higher at 1268, the 30-day MVRV didn't get nearly as high. So yeah, this is how prices grow. But the long term is still concerning, right? Being at 365-day active traders are at an average of plus 46%. And that's way too high. And that will come down eventually. But
we're definitely, don't get me wrong, in a top building process. I just am looking either for story which strikes through social channels via tracking, and it will end up probably in top 10. That is a clear sign. Or I will check somewhere during weekend on-chain metrics. They were not divergent yet. Maybe they started to now. It kind of it grows together, everything grows together. So it's you can say it partially healthy.
Yeah, it's at plus 75% over the last 30 days here. And as you were talking, I checked out the whale transactions, and look at how it just absolutely ballooned here right at this local top a couple days ago. So that's another sign that there could be some profit taking going on from the key stakeholders that may be a bit concerning. And we can look at it with some context here. So on the 26th or so is when it really spiked. If we look at the percentage held by different tiers, Prices at maybe a little over $1,000 now. So this would kind of be the red and yellow there, the sharks. 1,000. We're talking about millionaires. Bigger millionaires are dropping.
Yeah.
Maybe we can combine all of these. Very interested. Yeah, it's kind of flat now, but it wasn't just a couple weeks ago. So this was the sign. Like if we look at the price on top of that, that's a pretty nice leading indicator right there, in my opinion.
It is, yeah.
So they start accumulating big and kind of in the midst of all of the ETF hoopla. Prices don't really do much right away, but then they start to take off. And this was a big takeoff compared to the rest of the markets. Finally see a little bit of a dip, so they accumulate again right here. And then interestingly, they dropped back down, but regardless.
It's just different groups. What you see, some accumulating, some dumping, it's different. There are some really big players into making now, so they have different strategies. Some who were smart or lucky enough who might be exiting, which is by all means the right thing to do. Some others who join a bit later, they take more risks. So they have different patterns now.
Yeah, makes sense.
But some whales still accumulating, yeah, I've seen it. Some are dumping, yeah.
Of course. And you can see the dormant activity too, Maxim, with the mean dollar invested age really starting to drop down 2 weeks ago, and it's still dropping now. And I like to see that. So if you're wondering whether the rally's over, this tells me the rally may not be over. We may see a short-term top because of that dangerous MVRV. But as long as the dormant activity is moving down, while almost every other asset in crypto is going like this right now, that Maker could still have some more runs in it, maybe go toward 1,500.
Valid point. Valid point. That's a good. As long as not everyone start accumulating, it's okay. If everyone start accumulating and no one want to move because they believe, okay, this is a story for the years to come, then that's it. But
what do you make of the fact that supply and exchange is starting to move back up again? It's not a huge move, but we are starting to see, I mean, it could just be a reaction to the prices moving up, so people are trading it more.
Yes. Also,
it may not be much,
market makers also do it. So that's not a problem.
Yeah. I mean, it's at 10.1% now. If you look at the peak in March, it was way up at 13.5. So it's all relative, but keep in mind the fact that this is another short-term bearish indicator, which is I almost certainly the fact that so many coins are moving to exchanges is just due to the fact that prices are up 75% over the last 30 days. But if you start to see prices moving down and then supply and exchanges moves down with it, good sign that we have another rally in store. So I think Maker is a great one to watch. I appreciate you bringing it up, Max. All right, with that said, I think we're at a good stopping point here. We covered quite a bit. Even though it was a boring week, I think we made some good topics out of it and got to kind of talk about the markets as a whole, what to expect as the summer progresses. And by all means, guys, feel free to prep some questions for next week. We'd love to answer some asset requests you may have, specific news stories out there that you'd like us to discuss in more detail. We're always up for anything. So we appreciate you all tuning in. Maxim, I hope you stay relatively cool over there in Europe, and I'm going to do my best. It's scorching here in LA right now, so stay indoors and stay hydrated.
Yes, exactly. I was thinking, what should I tell you? Yeah, you know it by yourself. Living in LA for so many years, you know how to survive.
Yeah, absolutely.
For now, in Europe is good. It's okay, a bit rainy, but it's not hot, not cold. Okay.
Yeah, I think do you guys get Mediterranean weather where you are? Is it more kind of like that neutral Croatian Greece weather, or is it a little bit cooler than that?
It's a bit more extreme because it's a bit elevated or a bit more in the mountains here in Switzerland, so you get more extreme sometimes. can get hotter, and then winter can get also cold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, as soon as the Alps skiing weather is happening, that's when I'll be there. So.
Yep.
Well, very good, guys. I appreciate you all tuning in. Hope you all have a very happy, healthy, and safe weekend. And we will talk to you next week. Take care.
Yeah. Talk to you next week. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
You bet.